Okay, before we get started with all the stuff that we're going to do in Illustrator, I wanted to cover a few things, just some basics. You're going to hear this mentioned a lot, you're going to read it a lot, that there are two different formats out there. There's vector-based graphics and there's raster-based graphics. Okay? We got to know the differences and why, because a lot of people say, oh, you know what? I learned Photoshop, I love Photoshop. Illustrator's so different. Yeah, it's similar, but I really much rather do stuff in Photoshop. It's easier, blah, 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 blah. And I also get students that say, I learned Illustrator. When I get to Photoshop, oh, Photoshop, I don't like Photoshop. I'd much rather do Illustrator. I can do everything I can do in this program and I can do in the other program. Well, yes and no. We need to understand the big differences between them and why we're going to use them and what the specific things we're going to use them for to begin with. Okay? So right off the bat, I want to talk about vector graphics. Vector graphics are created from points, lines, shapes, and curves that are based on mathematical formulas. These elements are filled with colors, blends, tints, or gradients, and lines have stroke attribute such as solid dashed line with differences in thicknesses and colors. In other words, anything we do in Illustrator, well, 99% of the stuff we do, 98% of the stuff we do in Illustrator is vector-based creation. Everything's going to have a stroke and a fill. We're going to do everything with beautiful Bezier lines and curves, and it's just going to look really nice. Vector file extensions are going to be EPSs, AI vector programs, Adobe Illustrator, Macromedia Freehand, which is no longer around, but some people might know what it is or still have the program to use it, Flash, and CorelDRAW. Raster-based graphics are using pixels or little squares of color to create an overall image. A raster graphic is also referred to as a bitmap photo. So digital photographs are bitmap or raster images. Something you create in Illustrator will be a vector-based thing, a setup. Raster file extensions will be BMP, JPEG, TIFF, GIF. Okay? Raster-based programs would be Adobe Photoshop, Microsoft Paint, most default image editing software. Okay? So the huge difference here is pixel-based or line-based, basically. If you take a look at the samples that I have on the screen here, the two United FC logos, the first one is a vector graphic at 100%, and the second one on your right is a raster-based graphic. So I don't know if you can tell much of the difference there, but when you take a look at them enlarged, over here the vector graphic enlarged still is beautifully clean. It's just wonderful. And when you enlarge the raster-based one, and I didn't enlarge them really that much. You can see the jagged edges that's starting to look soft and fuzzy. It's because everything's made up of the little squares of color. So, in short, vector graphics are much cleaner. To put it all in a nutshell, vector graphics are resolution independent. So vector graphics are resolution independent. You can create a logo that might be from scratch and originally created 2 inches by 2 inches and then enlarged to the size of a truck, and it will look fantastic because it's not in need of any resolution. If you design that same 2 by 2 graphic in something like Photoshop, which is a raster-based graphic program, rasters are resolution dependent. Okay? Anything you build in one of these raster programs, you must know the output before you start creating. Because if you create that 2 inch by 2 inch graphic in Photoshop, it might look fantastic at that 2 inches by 2 inches. But then when you go to use it on the side of a truck and you enlarge it that much, it's going to look horrible. Okay? Take a look at the logo up top above here, how much we enlarged it, just that little bit, and how nasty it looks. If you're going from a 2 inch by 2 inch to a side of a truck or a building, it's just not good. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to recreate that artwork at the correct size or resolution that you need to do it. Okay? I always tell my students and everybody else, if you're going to start designing a logo, I don't care what kind of logo it is, you want to start in a vector-based program like Illustrator. Do your work all there. And then, once you have it done and you want to add a little splash or glitz or make it look a little different, then take that to Photoshop and you can do some things to make, alterations or variations of that logo. But all in all, build first in a vector-based program, then go to the raster. You can go raster to vector. It's not going to do a whole lot of good. I wish there was a good raster to vector program, but there really isn't. We can do some things in Illustrator, but it's just not 100%. Okay. If you want to understand more about vector versus raster, you can see the web link I have here. There's tons of information on the web. The more you know about this stuff, the better. These are great ground rules and basic information that you should know so that when you start building and drawing in any program, you know where you need to start and where you need to go and how you need to get there before you get going. All right? Super. Thank you very much. And let's dive right in.